Here you go, ma'am.
What are you doing?
Hey, what is this?
My clothes, you maniac!
It's an accident, I swear.
An accident? Oh! Oh! What are you doing?
Whoa, sorry, it slipped.
It's everywhere. My book.
I'll get napkins.
Napkins won't fix this. Look at my sweatshirt.
I'm so sorry, really.
I'd just like a table for one, please. Here, look at yourself. You smell like a dumpster. This is a $200 a plate restaurant, not a homeless shelter. Get out before I call the cops. Sir, I just want to eat. I can pay. Pay with what, girl? I make more in a week than you'll see in your life. Now move your dirty feet off my floor before I move them for you. The dining room went dead silent. Dozens of people sat frozen. A black woman in a paint-stained hoodie stood at the entrance of one of Atlanta's most expensive restaurants. A white manager blocked her path, chin raised, arms crossed, smirking like he had already won. He had no idea who she was, he had no idea what was coming, but I promise you this, by the end of this story, you're going to watch this man lose everything, and it all started with a glass of Coke. To understand what happened inside that restaurant, you need to know who this woman really was, and more importantly, you need to know why she was dressed like that. Her name was Naomi Richardson. On any given weekday, you might find her stepping out of a sleek black Mercedes and a tailored blazer, walking into boardrooms where people stood up when she entered. Because Naomi Richardson was the wife of Garrett Richardson, founder and CEO of Apex Dynamics, a defense and aerospace technology company valued at billions. But today was a weekend, and every weekend for some time, Naomi didn't touch the Mercedes, she didn't wear the blazer, she didn't put on a single piece of jewelry. Instead, she woke up early inside their estate in the Tuxedo Park neighborhood of Atlanta. She walked past the marble countertops, past the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a private garden, and reached into the back of her closet for the same outfit she wore every weekend, a faded Spelman College hoodie, a pair of paint-stained joggers, and a pair of sneakers so worn the soles were peeling at the edges. Garrett was already at the kitchen island reading through a stack of contracts. He looked up as she passed. "You're going to eat lunch today, right?" "I'll try," she said, kissing him on the forehead. She grabbed her keys, not to the Mercedes, not to the Range Rover, but to an older Honda Civic parked at the far end of the driveway, and she drove herself across town to Hope Bridge Community Center, a nonprofit she had personally founded to serve families in need. By early morning, Naomi was hauling boxes of donated winter coats through the back door. She was on her knees sorting school supplies into bags. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor with a group of kids, helping them sound out words in a reading circle. One little girl, no older than 6, drew a picture in crayon. It was a stick figure in a purple hoodie with big curly hair. Underneath it, in wobbly letters, she had written, "Miss Naomi, my hero." Naomi folded that drawing and tucked it into her pocket. She was helping repaint the center's reading nook. Sky blue on the walls, sunshine yellow on the trim. She got paint on her hoodie, on her joggers, even on her chin. She laughed and kept going. Around midday, her stomach growled loud enough for the other volunteers to hear. A woman named Patrice nudged her. "Girl, you skipped lunch again. The Grandview Grill is right up the road. Go eat something real." Naomi hesitated. She knew the Grandview. It was a trendy spot in Buckhead. Exposed brick walls, Edison bulb lighting, craft cocktails on chalkboard menus, the kind of place where people wore blazers on a Saturday afternoon. She looked down at her paint-splattered hoodie, her dusty sneakers, her hands still flecked with sky blue. "I look a mess," she said. "So what? Your money spends the same. Go eat." So Naomi grabbed her reusable grocery bag, still full of donated children's books she planned to drop off later, and drove a short distance north to Buckhead. She parked the Civic on the street. She walked through the front door of the Grandview Grill, and within moments of stepping inside, her entire life was about to change. The restaurant was packed. Well-dressed couples sipped wine at candlelit tables. A group of men in golf polos laughed near the bar. The smell of seared steak and rosemary hung thick in the air. A young hostess named Courtney looked up from her stand. She smiled and opened her mouth to greet Naomi, but she never got the chance because Kyle Colton got there first. Kyle Colton was in his late 20s, tall, and had the kind of confidence that comes from never once being told no. He had been shift manager at the Grandview Grill for some time, and in that time, he had made it his personal mission to keep the restaurant looking, as he liked to say, on brand. That meant no wrinkled shirts, no flip-flops, no anyone who didn't look like they could afford the menu. And it especially meant no one who might make his regulars, the golf polo guys, the wine and steak couples, the corporate lunch crowd, feel like the neighborhood was slipping. He spotted Naomi before she had taken 3 steps past the door. Paint-stained hoodie, scuffed sneakers, a reusable bag that looked like it came from a thrift store donation bin, and she was black. Kyle didn't hesitate, not even for a second. He stepped in front of the hostess podium, physically cutting off Courtney mid-greeting, and planted himself directly in Naomi's path. His arms crossed over his chest, his chin lifted, his voice carried across the entire dining room like he wanted every single person in the building to hear what he was about to say. "Excuse me, ma'am, this isn't a shelter. We have a dress code." Naomi stopped. She looked up at him. Her voice was steady, almost soft. The voice of someone who had learned a long time ago that calmness was its own kind of power. "I'd just like a table for one, please." Kyle let out a short laugh through his nose, not a real laugh, a performance. He turned to Courtney with a theatrical eye roll, gesturing at Naomi like she was something he had found stuck to the bottom of his shoe. Courtney, did we start taking walk-ins from Goodwill? A ripple of uncomfortable laughter came from a table near the window. Two women in matching designer sunglasses glanced at each other. One covered her mouth with manicured fingers, the other looked away and sipped her wine. Naomi didn't flinch. She kept her eyes on Kyle. Her hands stayed at her sides. Her grocery bag hung from her wrist, heavy with children's books. I'd like to be seated, please. I'm happy to wait if there's no table available right now. Kyle tilted his head sideways. He looked her up and down slowly, deliberately, starting at her scuffed sneakers and dragging his gaze all the way up to her paint-flecked hair, the way someone inspects something they have already decided to throw in the trash. Ma'am, I'm going to be real with you. His voice dripped with the kind of politeness that isn't polite at all. We have a strict dress code here at the Grand View. No athletic wear, no stained clothing, no open bags. He pointed one finger at her reusable grocery bag. That's 3 violations right there. I didn't make the rules. But he did make the rules because there were no rules. The Grand View Grill had never once posted a dress code, not on the door, not on the website, not on the menu. Kyle had invented it on the spot, right there, standing in front of a woman whose only crime was walking in while black and underdressed. Naomi glanced to her left. 2 tables over, a white man in his late 50s sat eating a bacon cheeseburger with his fingers. He wore a faded Atlanta Braves baseball cap pulled low over his forehead, wrinkled gym shorts that stopped above his pale knees, and a pair of rubber sandals with no socks. His bare feet were propped up on the empty chair across from him. Ketchup dotted the front of his shirt. That gentleman over there, Naomi said quietly, nodding in his direction, is wearing gym shorts, a baseball cap, and sandals. There's ketchup on his shirt. Does the dress code not apply to him? Kyle didn't even turn his head to look. That's different. He's a regular. So the dress code is selective. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. And the way she said it, calm, precise, without a single trace of anger, made Kyle's neck flush red above his collar. Something shifted in his face. The amusement drained out of it like water through a crack. His jaw tightened. His nostrils flared just slightly. He took a half step forward, closing the distance between them until Naomi could smell the coffee on his breath. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, harder, stripped of the fake politeness he had been wearing like a mask. Look, I don't know where you came from. I don't know what you think this place is, but I'm telling you right now, you are making our guests uncomfortable. You are disrupting the dining experience, and I need you to leave immediately. Naomi's hands didn't move. Her breathing didn't change. Her voice stayed level the way a lake stays level even when stones are being thrown into it. I'm not leaving. I haven't done anything wrong. I'd like to speak with the general manager, please. I am the manager on duty. Then I'd like your full name and the name of the company that owns this restaurant. Kyle laughed again, but this time the laugh had teeth. There was an edge behind it, not fear, not yet, but the kind of raw annoyance that comes when someone you have already dismissed refuses to disappear. When someone you have already decided is beneath you dares to stand at your level and look you in the eye. You want to file a complaint? He spread his arms wide, playing to the room. Go right ahead, sweetheart. Call whoever you want. Write a letter. Post it online. I promise you, nobody is going to believe someone who looks like you over someone like me. Someone who looks like you over someone like me. Every person within earshot heard it. The meaning was clear. It was never about a dress code. It was never about stained clothing or open bags or the comfort of guests. It was about skin. It had always been about skin. A woman at the bar set her glass down slowly. A couple near the window exchanged a long look. The hostess, Courtney, stared at the tile floor, her face burning red, her lips pressed shut. And then Kyle Colton did something that no one in that restaurant expected, something that would be replayed on screens across the country for weeks to come. He turned to the nearest bus tray, a gray plastic bin sitting on a stand beside the hostess podium, and grabbed a half-full glass of Coca-Cola. Condensation dripped from the outside of the glass. The ice inside had barely begun to melt. He looked Naomi dead in the eyes, and in one smooth, deliberate motion, he tipped the glass forward and poured the Coca-Cola directly onto her chest. The brown liquid hit her hoodie with a wet slap that echoed off the brick walls. Ice cubes bounced off her collarbone and clattered across the hardwood floor. Cola streamed down the front of her shirt, soaking through the cotton to her skin beneath. A dark stain bloomed from her chest to her stomach like a wound spreading open. Droplets spattered her sneakers. A puddle formed around her feet. The restaurant didn't go quiet. It went dead. Not a whisper, not a cough, not the scrape of a single chair. The jazz music piping through the speakers suddenly sounded obscenely loud in all that silence. Naomi stood perfectly still. Coke dripped from the hem of her hoodie in a slow, steady rhythm. A single ice cube rested on the toe of her left shoe. She could feel the cold liquid running down her ribs beneath her shirt. She did not wipe her face. She did not step back. She did not cry. Kyle set the empty glass back on the bus tray with a light clink. He wiped his wet hand on his black apron. Then he leaned in close, too close, until his mouth was inches from her ear. Oops! His whisper was loud enough for the nearest tables to hear. Now you really don't meet the dress code. He straightened up. He pointed one finger toward the front door and he smiled. Door's that way, sweetheart. Naomi still did not move. She stood in that puddle of Coca-Cola with her chin level, her shoulders back, and her eyes fixed on Kyle Colton's face. She was memorizing him. Every crease, every pore, every ounce of cruelty sitting behind that smirk. At a table near the kitchen pass-through, a woman named Denise Alfred sat with her phone raised in both trembling hands. She had started recording the moment Kyle first raised his voice at the hostess stand. She had captured every word, every gesture, every single frame of that Coca-Cola arcing through the air and hitting Naomi's chest. Her screen showed minutes and counting. She didn't stop recording. She couldn't. Behind the kitchen window, Chef Elena Davis stood frozen, her knuckles white against the stainless steel counter. Her jaw was locked so tight her teeth ached. She had seen Kyle do this before. Not the drink, but the humiliation, the profiling, the selective enforcement of rules that didn't exist. She had reported him multiple times to corporate, multiple written complaints, multiple times she was told the same thing. He keeps the dining room running smooth, leave it alone. She turned to the line cook beside her and whispered through clenched teeth, "This isn't the first time, but I swear to God it's going to be the last." At the hostess stand, Courtney gripped the wooden edge of her podium with both hands until her fingernails turned white. Her eyes were wet, her bottom lip trembled. She wanted to say something. She wanted to hand Naomi a napkin, a towel, anything. But Kyle was her boss and she was young, and she was afraid, so she said nothing. Nobody said anything. The only sound in this Grandview grill was the slow, steady drip of Coca-Cola hitting the hardwood floor. Seconds passed, then more. Naomi still hadn't moved. Kyle stared at her. His smirk was cracking at the edges. He had expected her to cry. He had expected her to curse at him or shuffle out the door with her head down the way the others had. The ones before her, the ones nobody talked about, but this woman just stood there soaked in coke, calm as concrete, looking at him like she was reading the fine print of his soul. It unnerved him, and when Kyle Colton felt unnerved, he didn't get quiet. He got louder. He snapped his fingers at a busboy, a skinny kid named Travis, barely out of his teens, standing near the service station, pretending not to see what had just happened. The snap echoed like a firecracker. "Travis, mop now. Clean this mess up." He jerked his thumb toward the puddle around Naomi's feet. "And make sure she's gone before the evening crowd gets here." Travis didn't move. He stood holding a bin of dirty dishes, eyes darting between Kyle and Naomi. His knuckles were white around the bin's edges. Kyle had already turned back to Naomi. He planted both hands on his hips and leaned forward until his shadow fell across her face. His voice dropped into something low and thick, like syrup mixed with venom. "Honey, I don't know where you wandered in from. I don't know what bus dropped you off, but let me make something crystal clear so even you can understand it." He paused. Let the silence sharpen his next words into a blade. "This place is not for people like you. It never was. It never will be. So take your little bag of whatever that is, walk out that door, and go find a soup kitchen. I'm sure they'll have something more your speed. People like you." He said it again, louder this time, not a whisper, a declaration, and every person in that room heard exactly what those words meant. There was no ambiguity, no dress code, no policy, just a white man in a pressed black apron telling a black woman in a paint-stained hoodie that she did not deserve to exist in the same room as him. A man at the bar turned his body away, staring at the liquor bottles like they held answers. A young couple near the patio whispered urgently, faces tight with something between disgust and cowardice. They wanted to leave. They didn't want to be the ones who stood up. Naomi let out a slow breath through her nose, the kind that holds back 1,000 words. She wiped a streak of Coca-Cola from her cheek with the back of her hand. Her fingers were steady, her eyes were dry, not because she didn't feel it, but because she had decided that this man would not get a single tear from her. When she spoke, her voice was so quiet, the nearest table leaned forward to hear. "I'd like your full name, and I'd like it now." Kyle barked a laugh, sharp and ugly, like something breaking. "My name? You want my name?" He grabbed the front of his apron and pulled it taut so she could read the embroidered tag. "Kyle Colton, shift manager, employee of the month, multiple times running. Go ahead, sweetheart, file your little complaint. I'll still be here tomorrow, and you'll still be out there." Naomi did not respond. She took 2 steps to the side, reached into her pocket, and pulled out her phone, a simple phone in a plain black case. Nothing that would make a man like Kyle look twice. She dialed 1 number, speed dial, pressed it to her ear. Kyle watched with arms folded. He assumed she was calling a friend, a sister, someone from whatever shelter he had invented for her in his mind. He shook his head and muttered loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Great, now she's calling for backup. What's next?" The whole family shows up in matching tracksuits. 2 women at a corner table laughed nervously. A man at the bar shook his head but said nothing. On the other end, Garrett Richardson picked up before the first ring finished. Naomi's voice was calm, measured, the voice of a woman who had already decided exactly what would happen next. "I'm at the Grandview Grill on Peachtree. A manager threw a drink on me and refused me service. I'm fine, but I need you to look into who owns this place." She didn't explain further. Years of marriage had built a language between them that lived underneath words. Garrett heard the stillness in her voice. He understood what it meant. His voice didn't rise, it dropped. It became the voice that silenced boardrooms. The voice he used when someone breached a contract, when someone touched what was his. 3 words, "Don't leave yet." The call ended. Naomi slid the phone into her pocket. Her face gave nothing away. Within minutes, Garrett's executive assistant pulled the corporate registry for the Grandview Grill. The restaurant was owned by Sterling Hospitality Group, a mid-sized conglomerate managing multiple properties across the Southeast, and Sterling Hospitality Group was currently negotiating a massive contract with Apex Dynamics for their corporate hospitality division. The paperwork was drafted. The lawyers had reviewed it. All that was missing was Garrett's signature. That signature was never going to come. Back inside, Kyle knew none of this. He saw a woman in a ruined hoodie who had made a phone call that would change nothing. He saw weakness. He walked back toward her, slow, theatrical. He wanted every eye on him. Are you still here? Seriously, do I need to call the police? Because I will. Naomi looked at him the way you look at the weather. Something you cannot control and do not need to fight. You can call whoever you want. I'm not leaving. Anger flashed across Kyle's face, hot and red, blooming from his collar to his ears. He yanked out his phone and dialed the non-emergency line. He turned away from Naomi but spoke loud enough for the dining room to hear. Yes, hi. I need officers at the Grandview Grill on Peachtree. I've got a trespasser refusing to leave. She's being aggressive and confrontational. She's making guests feel unsafe. Aggressive. He used the word aggressive about a woman who hadn't raised her voice once, who was still wearing the coke he had poured on her, who still hadn't clenched a fist. He hung up and turned back with fresh confidence, arms crossed, chin up, smirk locked in place. Cops are on their way, sweetheart. Last chance to walk out with whatever dignity you've got left. Naomi said nothing. Her hoodie clung to her chest, cold and damp. Her sneakers stuck to the floor. The bag of children's books hung heavy from her wrist, covers warped from the splash. She looked like exactly what Kyle wanted. Small, powerless, defeated. But she wasn't any of those things. Minutes later, a patrol car pulled up outside. No lights, no siren. 2 officers stepped through the front door. Kyle rushed toward them, voice pitched high with manufactured relief. Officers, thank God. This woman has been causing a disturbance for some time. She doesn't meet our dress code. She's refused to leave. She's trespassing. The officers looked past him. They saw Naomi near the hostess podium, a black woman in a soaked hoodie, arms at her sides, no weapon, no raised voice, just standing in a puddle of soda dripping onto hardwood. The older officer, Sergeant Hollins, with many years on the force, frowned. He looked at Kyle, at Naomi, at the puddle, at the empty glass on the bus tray, still wet around the rim. Something didn't add up. Ma'am, he said, stepping past Kyle. Are you all right? Can you tell me what happened here? Before Naomi could answer, a chair scraped hard against the floor. Every head turned. Denise Alfred was standing, phone raised in her trembling hand. The screen was bright red recording dot blinking. Her voice shook, but it carried across the entire room. Officer, I recorded everything from the very beginning. He threw a drink on this woman. He's been harassing her since she walked in. I have the whole thing on video, every single second. Sergeant Hollins looked at the phone, looked at his partner. Something passed between them, without words. Then he turned to Kyle. Sir, I'm going to need to see that video, and I'm going to need you to step over here with me now. The smirk on Kyle Colton's face died the way a candle dies when you pinch the wick. The left corner dropped first, then the right, then the light behind his eyes went dark. For the first time since Naomi walked through that door, Kyle Colton had nothing to say. Sergeant Hollins and his partner watched the video in silence. They saw Kyle block the door. They heard the jokes. They watched the coke arc through the air and hit Naomi's chest. And they heard "people like you" twice. When the video ended, Sergeant Hollins looked up at his partner. He didn't need to say a word. They both knew what they were looking at. At that exact moment, a sleek black Escalade pulled to the curb outside. The engine was still running when the rear door opened. Garrett Richardson stepped out. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, no tie, top button undone. 2 members of his executive security detail flanked him, both in dark blazers, both with earpieces, both scanning the sidewalk before he took his first step. He moved through the front door of the Grandview Grill like he owned it. And in a sense, after what was about to happen, he might as well have. The energy inside the restaurant shifted the instant he crossed the threshold. It was like someone had changed the frequency of the room. A man at the bar sat up straighter. A woman near the window grabbed her husband's arm and whispered something urgent. 2 businessmen at a corner table froze mid-conversation. One of them pulled out his phone and started typing, because they recognized him. Garrett Richardson had been on the cover of major business publications multiple times. His face had appeared on national networks and the front page of the Wall Street Journal. He was the founder and CEO of Apex Dynamics, a multi-billion-dollar defense and aerospace company that employed thousands across multiple states, and he was walking straight toward the woman in the soaked hoodie. He reached Naomi and stopped. He didn't speak right away. He looked at her, at the dark Coca-Cola stain spreading across her chest, at the damp hem of her hoodie, at the sticky residue on her sneakers. His jaw tightened, his nostrils flared, a vein pulsed once along the side of his neck. He reached out and touched the wet fabric. I suggest you take her and leave before this gets worse for both of you. Garrett turned to face him slowly, the way a man turns when he wants you to feel every degree of the rotation. This woman, his lips parted, his hands dropped to his sides. Garrett pulled out his phone and dialed. The speaker was on. The entire restaurant could hear the ringing and then the voice of Howard Slade, Sterling Hospitality Group's regional director, answering on the second ring. Mr. Richardson, good afternoon. Howard, I'm standing inside your restaurant, the Grandview Grill. One of your managers just poured a glass of Coca-Cola on my wife and refused her service. He called the police on her, and he did it all because she's black and wasn't dressed the way he thought she should be. Silence on the other end, then a stammering breath. Mr. Richardson, please, I'm sure we can discuss. There's nothing to discuss. The contract is terminated, effective immediately. Your company's values are clear, and I want you to know my legal team will be in contact before the end of the day. He ended the call, slid the phone into his jacket pocket, didn't look at it again. Kyle stood frozen. His mouth moved but produced no sound. His brain was trying to assemble a sentence, any sentence that could undo the last moments of his life. Finally, words came. Small, broken, pathetic. I didn't know. I just thought she was... Naomi cut him off. She stepped forward one step, just one, but it closed the distance between them in a way that made Kyle take a half step back. Her voice was quiet, but every person in that silent restaurant heard it. You thought what? That a black woman in a hoodie doesn't deserve to eat here? That she couldn't possibly belong in a place like this? She held his gaze. That's exactly the problem. Kyle opened his mouth again. Nothing came out. His eyes were wet. His hands were shaking. The apron he had been so proud of hung crooked on his chest. The Employee of the Month tag swung back and forth with each step. The front door closed behind him. Through the glass, the diners watched him being placed into the back of the patrol car. The overhead lights of the cruiser reflected off the restaurant windows, blue and red washing across white tablecloths and half-finished plates of steak. Inside, Garrett was already on the phone with his legal team. His voice was low and precise. Instructions, not conversations. Within the hour, Apex Dynamics issued a formal statement. All business relationships with Sterling Hospitality Group were terminated immediately, citing a corporate culture that enables racial discrimination. Howard Slade called back multiple times in a short period. The first call, Garrett declined. The second declined. The third declined. Each time, Howard's voicemail grew more desperate, offering to fire Kyle, offering a formal apology, offering to fly to Atlanta personally. Garrett didn't respond to any of them. Before Naomi left the restaurant, one person approached her. Chef Elena Davis came out from the kitchen. She had taken off her apron. Her eyes were red. Her hands were clasped together in front of her chest like she was holding something fragile. I reported him, she said. Her voice broke on the first word. Multiple times I filed complaints with the corporation. They told me to leave it alone. They said he keeps the dining room running smooth. She swallowed hard. Nobody listened to me. Nobody did anything. She looked at Naomi. Tears spilled down both cheeks. Thank you. Naomi reached out and took Elena's hands in hers. She held them. She didn't say it's okay because it wasn't okay. She didn't say it's over because it wasn't over. She just held this woman's hands in a restaurant that smelled like rosemary and spilled Coca-Cola, and she nodded. That evening, Denise Alfred sat in her living room and uploaded the video. She titled it, "Manager Throws Coke on Black Woman at Upscale Atlanta Restaurant." She posted it on multiple platforms. She tagged every local news station she could find. Within hours, it had spread widely. Within more time, it crossed millions of views. By later that night, it was everywhere. The hashtag appeared just after evening. 4 words, no spaces. Justice for Naomi. By morning, it was the #1 trending topic in the country. By the next day, Naomi Richardson's name was everywhere. Not because she sought it, but because millions of people had watched a man pour Coca-Cola on her chest and tell her she didn't belong. National networks ran the video in split-screen segments. Legal analysts broke down the case in real time. Local Atlanta affiliates parked satellite trucks outside the Grandview Grill. The restaurant was closed. A handwritten sign taped to the glass read, "Closed until further notice." Naomi retained Terrence Moore, a civil rights attorney with decades of experience and a reputation that preceded him into every courtroom. He had never lost a case he believed in. He believed in this one. Within days, Moore filed 2 actions, a criminal complaint reinforcing the battery charge and a civil rights lawsuit against Kyle Colton personally and Sterling Hospitality Group, corporately alleging racial discrimination, assault, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and violation of Georgia's public accommodation statutes. The discovery phase uncovered something worse than anyone expected. Elena Davis gave a sworn deposition. She described Kyle turning away a black couple on their anniversary because the husband wore sneakers while a white man in flip-flops sat nearby. She described him telling a Latino family the restaurant was fully booked, then seating a white party of 4 at an empty table minutes later. She described him calling black diners "those people" in staff meetings, and she described the multiple formal complaints she had filed with Sterling's Human Resources, each documented, dated, signed, and ignored. 2 former servers came forward next. One described being told by Kyle to keep an eye on tables with black guests because they don't tip and they'll skip out on the check. The other described Kyle instructing the hostess to seat black diners near the kitchen or restrooms, never by the window because it doesn't look right for the brand. Every statement was sworn. Every statement pointed to the same conclusion. What happened to Naomi was not isolated. It was a pattern, a system, a culture allowed to grow because the people in charge chose to look away. Then came the emails. Moore's team subpoenaed Sterling's internal communications. Buried in a chain between Howard Slade and a regional vice president named Craig Ellsworth was an email dated sometime before the incident. Elena's complaint was attached. Beneath it, Ellsworth had written sentences that would become the most damaging evidence in the entire case. He keeps our clientele looking right. The numbers at Grandview are up since he started. I don't want to lose that over a sensitivity issue. Leave it alone. Those 3 words, leave it alone, were projected onto a courtroom screen weeks later in front of a judge, a jury, and journalists. The criminal trial lasted days. The prosecution played Denise's full video on the first morning. The jury watched Kyle block the door. They heard the jokes. They watched the coke arc through the air. They heard "people like you" multiple times. Several jurors looked away during the pour. Kyle's defense attorney argued the drink was accidental, that Kyle reached for the glass and it slipped, that his comments were misinterpreted, that the situation was an unfortunate workplace misunderstanding. The video destroyed that argument. You could see his eyes lock onto Naomi before he tipped the glass. The deliberate angle of his wrist, the smirk that followed. Nothing about it was accidental. The jury deliberated for little time. Guilty, all counts, assault on a senior citizen, false arrest, violation of civil rights, filing a false police report. The judge delivered the sentence 1 week later. The courtroom was silent when he spoke. Manager, Kyle Colton, you were entrusted with a position of authority and a duty to serve every customer who walked through those doors. Instead, you used that authority as a weapon against the most vulnerable. You targeted a woman because of the color of her skin. You fabricated reasons to cover your abuse, and you did so believing, as you had believed multiple times before, that no one would hold you accountable. You were wrong. Years in state prison, no possibility of early parole for the first several. Whitaker received a suspended sentence and hours of community service. Both were permanently banned from hospitality management anywhere in the country. The courtroom erupted, not in cheers, in exhales. The kind of sound a room makes when something that should have happened a long time ago finally does. Naomi sat in the front row. She didn't clap. She didn't cry. She closed her eyes and nodded once, slowly, like a prayer had finally been answered. Sometime later, the dogwoods were blooming along Peachtree. Pink and white petals drifted across the sidewalks like confetti from a celebration no one had planned. Naomi Richardson was in her garden, same house, same porch, same wind chimes singing the same song her husband had hung up decades ago. She was on her knees in the soft dirt, planting new roses along the front walkway, red ones this time, her late husband's favorite color. She wore gardening gloves and a wide-brimmed sun hat. Her new glasses sat comfortably on her nose, both shoes on her feet, no bruises on her arms. Gospel music drifted from the kitchen window just like it always had, just like it always would. Across the street, Margaret Ellis waved from her porch. Naomi waved back. Same wave, same smile, decades of friendship in a single gesture. Some things don't change, some things shouldn't, but other things had changed, and they had changed because of what happened on this street some time ago. 3 blocks east at the corner, a new sign stood in front of the Hope Bridge Community Center. Bronze letters on a stone base. It read the Naomi Richardson Community Hospitality Initiative because every citizen deserves dignity. The city council had voted unanimously to establish it. A civilian oversight board with real authority to review complaints against businesses. Mandatory training for all hospitality staff. A complete overhaul of customer service standards. And a new early warning system designed to flag managers with repeated complaints before those complaints became someone's worst day. The former supervisors who had buried Kyle's complaints were gone. 2 had been fired. 1 faced a separate federal investigation for obstruction. The culture that had protected men like Kyle for years was being dismantled piece by piece, brick by brick. Naomi didn't take credit for any of it. When reporters asked her how it felt to be the face of hospitality reform in Atlanta, she shook her head and smiled. "I'm not the face of anything. I'm just a retired teacher who was on her way to volunteer." But then I'd pause and my voice would get quiet and I'd say the thing I always said. I had a husband who could make 1 phone call and change everything. Most people don't. This isn't about me. It's about making sure the next person, the one with no phone call to make, gets treated like a human being. CEO, Garrett Richardson came home every weekend for dinner. They sat on the porch together as the sun went down. Sweet tea in tall glasses, the wind chimes filling the silence between words. He told her about the new policies, the new training programs, the new managers coming through corporate who were learning a different way. She listened, nodded, then she told him the same thing she had told him since he was young. Power is not about what you can do to people, it's about what you choose not to do. Remember that. As for the men who started all of this, Kyle Colton sat in a cell at the state correctional facility, years. His appeals had been denied. His name was permanently entered into the federal civil rights violation database. No hospitality company in the country would ever hire him again. The man who once bragged that complaints never stick was now an inmate. No title, no authority, no power. Ryan Whitaker spent his days at the Atlanta Community Center, completing hours of court-ordered community service. Every morning he helped residents with their meals, their paperwork, their walks around the garden. People the same age as the woman he had watched being humiliated while he stood by and said nothing. The irony was not lost on him. It was not meant to be. On a Saturday morning, Naomi finished planting her last rose bush. She stood up slowly, brushed the dirt off her gloves, and looked down the street. The same oaks, the same houses, the same neighborhood someone once told her she didn't belong in. She belonged. She had always belonged. And now there was a bronze sign blocks away to prove that the whole city knew it. She picked up her Bible, the new one with a leather cover her granddaughter had given her to replace the one that cracked on the pavement, and headed inside to get ready for church. The wind chimes sang behind her. Some things don't change, some things shouldn't, and some things, the ones that needed to change most, finally did. A manager dragged an elderly black woman's dignity through the mud in a restaurant simply because of how she looked. But the real story, many people filed complaints against Kyle Colton before he touched Naomi Richardson. Many. Excessive force, racial profiling, unlawful treatment. Every single complaint was dismissed, marked unfounded, filed away. Then Kyle poured that drink, threw her belongings on the ground, and suddenly everything worked. Investigations, trials, accountability, years in prison. Why did the system finally work for Naomi? Because her husband was the CEO. But Naomi asked the question that breaks this whole story open. What about the ones who don't have a husband who's CEO? Many people before Naomi got nothing. No investigations, no judges, just complaints buried in filing cabinets by supervisors who chose silence. Ryan Whitaker sat in that restaurant watching his manager humiliate an innocent woman. He never spoke up, never stepped in, just watched. How many times have you seen wrong happen and said nothing? Told yourself someone else would handle it, or it wasn't your place? Whitaker's silence gave Kyle permission for years until someone with power finally forced the truth into daylight. Share this if justice shouldn't require connections. Comment, when did your silence cost someone else? Subscribe for stories proving accountability starts with people watching. Naomi proves something painful. The system doesn't protect everyone, just the ones loud enough to be heard.